Mr. Ethical here. It's been suggested that I make some short videos to explain the HSBC frauds and the Tory government involvement in cover-up, which is quite scandalous. So I'm going to talk about, in the first video, I'm going to talk about the blog on my website, which is called The Smoking Gun, because I've recently done some research. I've never understood why the BBC appointed Rona Fairhead, who is an HSBC director, to be the chair of the trustees of the BBC. But having done a little bit of research, it's now become quite obvious to me. Last year I made a Freedom of Information Act request to the Financial Conduct Authority asking what action they'd taken on my report to them of the £1 billion fraud by HSBC. And they sent me a response basically saying that the bank were allowed to add the illegal charges to accounts. Well, I knew that wasn't true because the Office of Fair Trading had already made an order against them saying that they must not add the charges to the accounts. However, a friend of mine, Joel Benjamin, who's a financial campaigner, wrote to the bank asking what the bank had done about my allegations on the fraud, and the bank replied that the bank were entitled to add the charges. Two paragraphs were exactly the same wording as the text I received from the FCA. So I'd caught them out. They had colluded together. The bank, the HSBC, had lied to the FCA, and the FCA had simply passed on the lie to me and to Joel Benjamin. So I blogged about this on the 30th of June last year, and immediately, because my website is constantly monitored by the bank and the FCA, immediately the FCA, the bank, started reading the blog. Dow Jones and the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments, which is the bankers' professional body, on the same day as I published the blog. That was 30th of June, and then during July, that same blog was also looked at by the Houses of Parliament a few times, by the BBC, and of course by FCA and HSBC. And at the end of July last year, Sajid Javid, the Culture Minister, announced that Rona Fairhead, who is a director of HSBC Bank, was going to be the new chair of the trustees of the BBC. Now, Rona Fairhead was not on the shortlist of candidates. If you look at my blog, my website is nicholaswilson.com, and the blog is called Smoking Gun. There is not one news report from that time, July, August last year, which reports that Rona Fairhead was a shortlist for that job. She was parachuted in by the government to take over the BBC, and to this day the BBC have not reported anything about the HSBC fraud or the cover-ups. Cameron originally covered this up when the OFT order was made. It was hidden away in a press release so that it was missed by the press, because it was published at the time that Cameron was making Stephen Green a Lord and a Trade Minister. So Cameron had already covered this up. He'd already pleaded with Barack Obama in the States not to prosecute HSBC in the States over their money laundering. So they got off with a $1.9 billion fine. But in the UK, what he's done is put an HSBC director in charge of the national broadcaster to make sure that the fraud remains covered up. I'm doing everything in my power to make sure it doesn't remain covered up. I will make further short videos explaining other aspects of the fraud over the next coming week or so.